Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this session on launching one-to-one device strategies with cooperation. My name is James Jackson. I am a Director of Digital Transformation for the Sure Education Trust. My job really is about putting forward new strategies, new ways of working, teaching and learning, all those kind of things, and actually developing our digital transformation, our digital offering to both our staff and our students. A little bit of background about me. Started life as a software engineer, steadily, for some odd reason, transgressed into working in a library, and then finally ended up in teaching. So yes, I'm a techie, but I also have teaching background. I taught for about 7 or 8 years. And I've taught everything from tinies, from primary school all the way up to master's level qualifications. I've taught in every sector of education, all the way through to, as I said, I've taught everything from 9 months to 90. And these days, I'm more focused on developing digital information and digital ways of working for teaching and learning. So, who do I work for? I work for the Sure Education Trust, and you can see a quote from our CEO right on the screen. The key thing about the Sure Education Trust is we are a very diverse trust. We cover around 30 schools, and we have primaries, secondaries, and special education based settings. And we cover about roughly 200 miles from bottom school to top school. But one of the key things about what we are is we are all unique. Every single school has their own identity. The trust doesn't put a particular, you all have to operate a certain way. The way we work is in cooperation with our head teachers. So that's a very different model to what you sometimes see in a lot of education. So what that means is when we've developed digital strategy and digital development, it becomes more of a conversation and more of a discussion rather than a you will go and do. So it really means that every single piece of how we work and how we've worked over the past year or so since I came in has really been about developing these relationships not only with our heads and with our trust, but also with our students, with the local communities, with our suppliers, and about how does that entire process work rather than just here's an iPad, here's a Mac, here's a PC, go do. There's a real inbuilt focus, and it's something the trust is absolutely key about. Whatever anybody's starting point, all children should have the opportunity to be successful. We have a catchphrase, a thing we call unique by design, and you'll see my take on that for digital as we go through. But it really is about making sure that every single child in the trust, no matter where their starting background, no matter what type of school they're in, has a complete way of approaching and a way of working that means that it's unique to them. And really, the device strategy and the devices we brought in and how we've done that really help to reinforce that. So a key thing for us is how that came about. And as you can see from the trust itself, that focus is very much on how does the trust give that cooperation, how do we work together, and how do we help children achieve beyond their expectations. And our CEO Jo is absolutely instrumental in that. Her whole ethos is we do this for the kids, for whatever they are, whether they're brand new into reception, whether they're in one of the colleges we have, whether they're a child with particular needs, whether they're in a mainstream school, it doesn't matter. What we deliver is for each individual child in each setting. So, wonderful quote that came out of the UN Department for Economic and Social Affairs report in 2021 was the new normal is digital. Now, some of you may think COVID brought that on. Actually, it was already going that way. And if you look at the curve on any sort of report on this, they will tell you that digital has steadily been becoming the more normal. Now, what that means is simple things like for those you go into bars, for example, or you go into a restaurant. I can't remember the last time I actually spoke to a waiter these days and said, oh, can I have this? It's more scan your phone. Here's an app. Your QR code controls where you need to be. You can pay for it in the app. I'll tell you this, it makes life significantly easier when splitting the bill. But apart from that, it's very much and very key about how digital is becoming more normal. We deal with primary school kids now who are far better on their devices. They might have been using an iPad they were given or their parents' phone or whatever. They've been using that since they were almost able to use their hands. So they're much more capable with digital than most of us are. And it's really about engaging in that conversation with our staff, with our communities, and with our students about how do we engage, bearing in mind that these kids will be going out into a world where digital is just a part of what they do. I always like to turn around to staff when we first give them iPads and go, how old is the iPad? And they're like, it's fairly new. It's a couple of years old. It's 4 or 5 years. I was like, 2011. You're looking at 11, 12 years now, coming up on 12 years now with 2023 coming around the corner. Even the early editions were 2010, that tablet type PC, all this kind of thing, it's not new anymore. But the actual development of using digital as the first stage is, and that is the new normal. It goes back to those, for those of us who remember a technician side. I used to be a web developer back when, it was mobile first as a strategy. That kind of approach has now brought this on, and it's digital is now the first thing you think about. And actually, when we're teaching and learning, it should be something we start to build in rather than an afterthought on top. So, aiming about the trust and how we built this with cooperation, it's worth you knowing where we started. So where we started, we had 26 schools back then. We had iPads in one of them, and we had about 50 of them. So they were occasionally used, they were a class set or a couple of class sets, and we had about 50 of them. 3 of our schools, including one of our biggest secondaries, didn't even have Wi-Fi. They didn't have Wi-Fi when I started. What we're talking about is, where were we, is a year ago. And that's the scary thing. So 3 schools had no Wi-Fi, and we only had iPads in one. Now, the average internet speed in the trust was 4 meg. 4 meg doesn't even order your food anymore. But that was what it was. We had maybe 10 technicians across the trust, if that. Sometimes, in some cases, we only had 5 in. We had no centralized contracts. Every single school was buying their own stuff, and in a lot of cases, massively overpaying for it. And the trust didn't have any focus on IT or digital. That's why they brought me in. They brought me in to sort of develop this conversation. We had some schools that were flying with it, had computer rooms that were off the charts, some amazing technology departments, but it was pockets of behavior. So one of the first sort of things we came in to do was to develop this as a trust strategy. So what did we do? Well, we set ourselves some objectives. The first one was to put a device in everyone's hands for teaching and learning activities. Now, this could be, as you can see from the picture, an iPad, it could be a laptop, it could be a PC, it could even be a mobile phone. But really where we started was to say every single person in the trust should either have a device that's their own, or they should be able to access one. That led on to the second objective. Curriculum devices are one-to-one across the trust and used in every appropriate lesson to enhance engagement. Doesn't mean they're available in every lesson, doesn't mean they should be. I've been a teacher for a large number of years and I taught computer science. Sometimes I would yank my students off the PCs and go, right, piece of paper and a pen, draw this out. Luckily, the iPad can now do that, so it removes it a little bit. But that kind of focus really changes it. Now, one of the key things I came in on, and we've already achieved this one, which is all teaching staff were to have a one-to-one tablet connected device. And so you can see it from the picture there, that's the approach we took, was an iPad with a pen with a keyboard, which means that device can be used as effectively a much more mobile laptop replacement, no matter where they were in the trust, no matter where they were on a sports field or in a classroom or in an art room or in a home ec room, wherever they were, this device was literally pick up, move, use. And I can absolutely say this, we've already achieved that one. All support staff to have a device capable of completing their role effectively. Some of our admin staff, an iPad wasn't the best approach, so we've gone with either MacBooks or we've gone with MacBook Airs, or we've even gone with PC. We've gone with PCs and Windows devices, because depending on what they do, there are still some things in the education system that are very heavily Windows based. So they're not even like Office based. Office you can run on everything. They're very heavily Windows Power App based, which still isn't really available yet on Apple devices. And then finally, we were to make sure that content and applications are available on all of these devices. So one of the key things for us was that there should be no loss of quality or no loss of device, no matter what they did. So if they were on an iPad, they could use apps effectively, if they moved to a PC, if they moved to a Mac. The whole idea was to build this shared ecosystem of apps and applications, not just apps, but applications of that really allow people to move very effectively between things. Ultimately, what that meant was that you had this sort of shared cloud service, and it's something we've worked on. That means that no matter where those staff are in whichever school in the trust, they can get at stuff, and they can get at stuff in a way they're used to. So, what did we do? You've heard me already say we've achieved some of this, and there's a reason why. We came up with something called digital by design. You heard us say for the trust it's unique by design. We came up with digital by design for our digital offering because actually this is the key thing. Thinking back to that quote from the UN report, digital is the new normal. So how do you make your education system be part of that? Well, you design by digital first. So you look at the lesson plans, you look at what it is you need to do, and everything we do has this digital focus. If we can save staff time by going digital, we do. If we can make a lesson more engaging by going digital, we do. And we look for ways to do that. And then the next key thing, and we do it as a two-line thing, digital by design, skills for life. Because what we're actually teaching these kids, what we're teaching our staff, is skills they're going to need and use in later life. It's not just about, here, go and learn Romeo and Juliet by doing something in Minecraft. Off you go. It bears no relevance. What we're saying here is when you do that, that skill will allow you to do something later on. So the key thing here is to embed the digital in such a way that it develops skills for life. And it really did make a difference when we're talking to our students and the staff and the parents and the communities, that this is not just give the student a device. This is the device, and the digital approach we are taking allows them to develop skills they are going to use in that later life, and that will become incredibly key for them as they go on. Because it's always that old adage of, oh, when do you use algebra in later life? Or when do you use this skill in later life that you learn in school? Sometimes that's completely true. Other times, a software engineer, I use algebra fairly regularly. But ultimately, the idea is to make sure that skill set and those skills is very clearly embedded. So beyond that, it's about using that. And of course, the cooperation thing is key for us. We worked with every school. We spoke to every school. We looked at what they needed, what their students need. You can hear me talking about it. You can hear me saying we spoke to communities, we spoke to our heads, we spoke to our teachers, we spoke to our students. It isn't just about me saying this is the best way forward, off you go. It's about them saying to me, here is what we need. How can you facilitate that? And then my job is to look at it from a trust perspective and go, how can we make this work? So we created a vision and framework. Because the trust itself is quite disparate, a strategy doesn't really cut it. It's called a strategy. It doesn't look like one. I grew up being a teacher for too long. Frameworks are what I work with. I worked for a couple of the exam boards, so I'm used to frameworks. So ultimately, we set a vision, which is what we expect, and you've seen some of the objectives for that. And then we built a framework. Now, the framework was, we know every single school is not going to be flying from day one. We're saying, right, where do you want to be on this framework scale? And where are you now? And how do we bridge that gap? So ultimately, what we ended up doing was to provide this mid thing. So it was literally a grid, and they ringed where they are now, and then they ringed where they want to be. And then we said, right, that's 2 years worth of work. Right, let's put an action plan in to get you there. And sometimes we've had one school who we thought would be 2 years worth of work. They did it in 6 months. Other school were looking at it saying it would be 6 months worth of work. We've now had to extend it out to 2 years because other things have got in the way. That's perfectly fine, because ultimately everyone's adhering to the same vision. The framework is how they get there. And for some people that will go quick, for some it will go slow. But this is that bottom-up approach. This is not me saying you will go do. This is me saying to the schools, how do you want this to work? And we grow through. Now, that's a very different approach, because ultimately they are taking ownership, which I always find when doing anything like this, it breeds their cooperation, and they're more likely to do it because they feel they own it. Ultimately, they're working towards the vision and that myself and Joe, our CEO, and everyone else in the trust has, but they are building from the bottom up. They are building it in and embedding, and then ultimately it will flow into this wonderful thing at the top. Well, that's the aim anyway. That's how we work, and because of this disparate trust, because of the way every school is individual, this seemed to work for us. But what it did mean is the next bit. It allows for active engagement using the framework and cooperation. It's not just, here's a thing that we say you're going to be, go be. It's, here's where you need to be. Here's the steps you need to take and the levels you need to go through to get there. How can we get you up the levels? So it becomes very agile for those of us, especially in software engineering. Agile came out of what we do. It becomes very much small batch mentality, right? Do a thing, make it better. Do a thing, make it better. Do a thing, make it better. So your MVP, your minimum, becomes higher every time. So to get you there, you actually work on that philosophy. But it means it's led by the settings. They lead where they want to be, and we support. If I've got 20 of the schools saying to me, I want something to be able to allow me to do this thing, like mark effectively or quicker, I'll go, right, here's 3 products. Let's have a look at something. So for example, we've just gone through a process and Showbie is about to be used for the entire trust because the majority have said we want to do this, this, and this. And we've said, great, right, let's bring Showbie in. So we brought in Showbie and a few of the products. Showbie was the one we chose, and I'm steadily over the summer holidays rolling out for them. So that'll be ready for them. What this means is it removes that narrow thinking, because ultimately it means we can do certain things. So if I've got one school saying to me, we can't get maths to work using the iPads or using the devices, right, your school can't, but I know a school that has. So then I'll go out and grab the specialists from that school, bring them in, and then we raise the school that's got a problem. On the vice versa, this school over here might have an incredibly effective English department and this one doesn't. So great, we swap over. So what it really does is breeds that familiarity and means that we completely cooperate across the trust. And it isn't just me. I'm a pretty good teacher. I know how to teach, and I know especially computing and business, but I'm not an English teacher. But I've got some exceptional English teachers who can go and show how to showcase using the iPad in a session. Vice versa, geography, one of our best teachers in the trust is a geography teacher. And there's a great story. I'll keep the simple version. When we first gave her an iPad, she turned around to me and said, what's this? Don't want it. Now she is the biggest advocate of using the iPads in sessions. She's absolutely fantastic, and she does some amazing stuff with the iPad, things like Google Earth. She does some stuff with Civilization. She does some stuff with Minecraft, and some incredible things we can do. And it removes that narrow thinking because everybody interacts with each other. We put some focus groups together and go, right, maths can all meet and do some digital stuff, and people are throwing ideas in, going, we can do this, we can do that. All that kind of stuff really helps us develop and go through. And that's really been a key part of the vision and the framework we do. It all comes down to this cooperation. So I'm just going to play a video now that should actually showcase some of this and how it works in action.
Within education, technology is obviously emerging more and more. It can be a case of the barriers become overwhelming, so the cost, the amount of time you'll have to put into staff training, how will the students respect the devices, are they going to get broken, are they going to get damaged, what will we need to do to make this happen? And unless you have a really passionate, knowledgeable person in your school, that won't happen because there's a fear factor associated with it as well. So we did a load of research around it, made the links that we needed to do with different technology providers and companies that could help us. So that's where our appointment of our Director of Digital Transformation came. That's where we began to fly, and I think he's unique in that he has a teaching background but also the technical background, because quite often there's a divide between the two. So having that post in place for us was a pivotal moment in terms of our strategy.
Digital by Design Skills for Life. It's about allowing us to equip our kids to go out there with the skills they need to engage in modern life. The strategy itself came from a lot of work of talking to schools and realising that everybody in the trust was in a completely different place, and saying, how can we get you all from where you are to where you need to be?
So our strategy very much is around the right device at the right time, and that everybody has access to the device that they need, whatever that device may be. So we have children in special schools with really complex needs, right the way through to primary primary, secondary and sixth form children who are applying for Oxford and Cambridge. So we have that whole dimension of students. And the iPad gave us something that actually all of those students could benefit from using. So rather than just random different devices all over the trust, if we'd got a key strategy or key device where the technology may support that learning, there's always teachers who are known as being outstanding, brilliant teachers, and teachers that may be struggling a little bit and needing to develop their practice. Through technology, all of a sudden, everybody is on a level playing field, and you have teachers who may not have been particularly innovative in their pre-technology teaching, but actually put a device in their hands, and all of a sudden they're inspired and motivated and really engaged with children in a way that maybe they haven't been able to achieve previously, that we could hook our learning onto and promote the training through. What we've heavily pushed is that the technology is the tool to support the learning, not the be-all and end-all of the lesson. So you plan your lesson as you would as a teacher and then look for opportunities. The challenge then for us was, we're going to get you an iPad, go and use it.
The problem with technology initiatives is if they're led as technology initiatives, they tend to fail. If they're led as people-first initiatives, they do really well, and that's exactly how we're pushing this.
There we go. So ultimately, I appreciate that's almost reiterated a lot of the stuff I said, but it's not just me saying it. And you can actually see there some of our students, our staff in the trust. You saw the geography teacher I was talking about, and sports and everything else, and all these different types of settings, all with these devices. You've now seen exactly what I'm talking about. We thought it was worth showing you the video so you got an idea of what it was. So one of the key things that I always say, partnering helped. This cooperation feel works great with the trust because we're all together, but partnering with outside providers worked wonders. So we partnered with Jamf, we partnered with Sync, we do a lot of stuff with Apple Financial Services. So one of the key things I would say is this whole cooperation thing only works if you talk to each other. So bi-weekly meetings, we sat down, we worked out the plan. And because each school, even though it's individual and having their own thing, we've still kept a centralized, identical rollout. So if you walk from one school to another, it's still the same setup. So centrally, they tell me if they want an app. I work with the other schools and we go, is this something that's usable? And then we push it out. So it means you've got a very clear plan, an identical rollout using both Sync systems and Jamfs. The technical support and the educational support's been amazing. We've got it from all sides. It's not just about us sitting on our own, because as good as we all are, there's always somebody out there with better knowledge. So having that kind of cooperation relationship with Sync, Apple and Jamf really did allow us to develop this in a way that wouldn't have been possible otherwise. Talking to Apple Financial Services and lease agreementing everything rather than just buying outright, it's a fantastic way of really getting the devices in, and meaning that you're not overpaying for things, and you approach it in such a way that's cost effective. And also the training's been amazing. And clear account management. If you're going to do these kind of things, especially when I'm looking down the nose of 6,000 to 9,000 iPads these days and looking at 16,000 by the time we finish, you've got to have clear account management. So being able to get into, which is why I love Jamf, I can get in and out of my accounts and all my schools separately really quickly. I can apply things to all of them. Using Jamf School makes my life so much easier, but that wouldn't have happened without the work we did in setting that up with our technical providers. So, where are we now? You've heard me say about certain things. Here's the proof in the pudding. The iPads are now in 18 schools. We're now a couple of schools more than we started with, the 26 as well. And 11 of those are one-to-one. By the end of this year, 28 schools will have iPads at least 1 to 2. But we will be fully digitally mobile and digitally one-to-one by the end of 2023. That roughly is about 17,000 iPads. The digital strategy launched in January, and that framework I spoke about, we could call it an active use framework. We revisit it, we talk to the schools, everything's in continuous use. It's not just about off you go, tell me it once and away you go. There's a very clear, we go back, we negotiate, we look, we talk. Where are you getting on with? What's working, what isn't? All of our schools now have Wi-Fi because digital by design is a focus. Ultimately, we've committed to this. We are going to be in there. This is going to work. this is exactly how we're going to be. And the first thing we did was give everybody Wi-Fi. So that's all in now. Our average internet speed has gone from 4 meg to 70. Because again, if you've got, even some of our small schools, you're looking at 300 kids. Some of our larger ones, you're looking at nearly 2,000. You've got that many iPads going and that many connections. You need an internet speed that works. So one of the key things that this sort of focus on digital strategy and talking to the schools allowed us to do is go, here, look at how everybody else is doing. If you bring yourself up to this level, look at what more you can do. And it really does make a difference. And we use Sync and Jamf to completely fully support every single school. So it isn't just about me going in, it isn't just about other schools going in and saying this is better, whatever. It's about external providers and external companies doing exactly the same. So we all work together to make this better. But of course, that's just a thing. What you really want to know is, has this had a benefit? And here's what benefit it's had. Lesson start time in schools with iPads has improved from 6 minutes on average to 1 minute or less. So that means from you walking into a classroom to the lesson being ready to go has gone down from 6 to 8 minutes in most cases to 1 minute or less. That's because no longer you're having to log into a PC, wait for it to load up your PowerPoint or whatever else you want to do, make sure the smartboard's turned on, all that's gone. Where we put iPads in, we also put Apple TVs in. So staff members walk into a classroom, they hit mirror on the iPad, and the lesson is good to go. 1 minute or less is us being polite. We've tended to find most of our lesson start times now are on 30 to 40 second mark. That gives 5 minutes a lesson back to teaching and learning. That's 24 hours every academic year. I'm not quite sure the kids thank me for that, to be honest. I'm sure the staff do because it gives them more time to work. But ultimately, that's 24 hours worth of time based upon a standard teaching week and standard teaching term back in the hands of our staff members to provide for teaching and learning. Next statistic, disengaged groups shown to be more engaged with digital means. We've proven this through a reduction in low-level disruption of between 40 and 50%. So this is that class noise, one kid being sent out for just generally being a pain or just saying something, doing something because they're engaged in the lesson, because they've got a device that's their own where the lesson is being ran through. That low-level disruption has basically just been eradicated in a lot of those settings. The next number is the one that, to be honest, when I told this to Apple, they were absolutely fantastic about it. The improvement of between 50 and 700%. Yes, you read that right. 700% in attainment grades in primary and secondary education where devices have gone one-to-one. That's not a number that's been plucked out. I actually did some master's research on this, and that's completely where we have gone one-to-one with devices. You have got straight away a massive improvement in attainment. So what we mean by attainment is the grade the students are achieving. So their actual improvement in some cases is 700 times. So they've gone that far up on the scale. We're looking at, sometimes 2 or 3 grade level improvements for some kids just off the back of this. And that was actually done as part of my master's research, so all those numbers are backed. And that's massive. Take any of the other numbers out of here off. This focus on the kids being first and what they're trying to achieve, that number alone sells it for us personally as a trust and why it's the right approach. Couple other things, purely for the finance managers. Electricity usage is down 22%, especially in this age of sort of growing prices, and photocopying budget reduced by 50%. There's some big numbers. And in actual cases, we found in most schools that reduction has actually paid for the iPads. And then reduction in repetitive tasks for teachers being proven through digitally engaged methods of delivery. Very long-winded way of saying they don't have to stand in front of the photocopier so often, or if they want to do something for all the kids, they do it once and press it to everybody. It means that it doesn't have to be replicated. They just give it and it auto-replicates. One of the best quotes I had from a staff member was it gives them an hour a day back. An hour a day. We were talking to most teaching staff, and we've averaged it, doing a bit of flow analysis, at about 50 hours a year of planning and prep time is now back in the hands of our teaching staff due to going one-to-one device and through this cooperation with them about how best to use that and utilize that. So where do we go from here? The next steps for us are to really fully embed it within the schools. It's good and we're getting there and we've proven some amazing stuff, but the next steps are key. We've done it for a year, we've really focused on it. Now it's a case of how do they take it forward? How do we keep that momentum going? And that's absolutely key for us to fully embed the technology within the school environment. And that is something that we are going to push on with. Thank you very much for listening. I really do hope that this session on developing one-to-one device strategies with cooperation with both partners and schools and students and parents and everybody else really has helped you think about how you could do this with your own way. Thank you very much indeed.